Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Riverwood Conservancy's webinar, Going Green to Save Some Green with Carson Arthur. My name is Stephanie. I'm the Community Program Coordinator at the Riverwood Conservancy. I hope you are all doing well and staying safe. Before we get started, I just want to mention that all of our July programs are now on our website. We have virtual webinars on photography, Algonquin wildlife research, trivia night, and more. And we are easing our way back into in-person events that adhere to public health guidelines. We'll be offering outdoor yoga, meditation, and forest bathing throughout July and August. Spaces are limited, so please register for as many virtual or in-person programs that you would like at the riverwoodconservancy.org/events. As well, we have a photography course starting next Monday with Dave Taylor and running every Monday evening in July. There are a few spaces available, so please join at the riverwoodconservancy.org/nature photography. And before we get to our speaker today, the Riverwood Conservancy would like to acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee nations. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this place is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. And today, we are super excited to have Carson Arthur, who is a landscape designer and television personality with several shows that can be seen worldwide. Throughout his 20 years television career, Carson teaches homeowners how to raise the value of their homes through outdoor renovations while maintaining a focus on environmentally friendly choices. He is the North American outdoor design editor for Outdoor Lifestyle magazine, has a syndicated radio show called Take It Outside, is the spokesperson for Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate, and the author of the sold-out book Gardens Designed for Outdoor Living, and also has a 2019 book called Vegetables, Chickens, and Bees. I love that title. So welcome, Carson. If you have any questions during his presentation, please type them in the Q&A section on Zoom or the comment section on Facebook, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. So Carson, that is all from me. I will hand it over to you.
No pressure after that huge intro. Thank you very much.
I told you it was long.
Fair enough. Thank you. All right, hi everybody. As you heard, my name is Carson Arthur, and I have been doing this for a little while. And I have been trying to get to your venues and to do some speaking to you in person for a long time. My good friend Kevin Sherwin has been trying to get me out, and unfortunately, it hasn't timed out. But through the lucky, situation that we're in right now, trying to be positive about it, I get to be with you today. So today's presentation is going to be a little bit different. It is a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm still going to be here talking to you, but I have a lot of visuals to share with you. So if you don't see me, but you hear me, that's okay. That's the nature of the technology today. So let's get started on this and see if I can do it properly. All right. So this presentation today is called The Breaking Point. And are we showing the right video?
We are. It looks great.
Woohoo! All right, let's go back. So this is called the Breaking Point. And what we're going to talk about today is what's happening in the world around us with regards to our own backyards. I'm not going to be talking about city and commercial development. I'm going to really be talking about our own outdoor spaces and what we're doing and what our neighbors are doing around us and how this is impacting our urban areas. Now, moving forward, we're going to talk a little bit about gardens in the beginning. So when I first started my career, this was the classic garden, full of flowers, some decorative pieces. It was about, my collections of plants that I liked, my one boxwood and my beautiful lilies, and I really collected pieces to fill a garden. And the gardens would go down one side of the property line, across the back, and up the other side. You'd have some trees in there for shade and for privacy, and we'd have our fences, and there was grass in the middle. And if we're really affluent, we were lucky to have a swimming pool or maybe a really large deck. But this was the traditional Canadian backyard. And then things started to change. We started to see more gardens like this, where people started to do mass plantings, bigger clumps of the same plant. And a lot of the landscape companies that started helping us look after our outdoor spaces started doing this for us. So we started to see bigger masses and less diversity in our outdoor yards. We started to see huge clumps of hostas. I always say this is the beginning of the miscanthus, the big grasses where every front yard had miscanthus in the front because it was easy to look after. Then we started to see a shift away from plants into this type of backyard. Now, if you're a true gardener, you're looking at this and you're groaning and saying, no, that's not for me. And I completely understand, but it became very popular for a lot of people. In fact, if you go onto several of the online websites right now and look up backyard design, you're going to see more pictures like this than the previous images with the plants. And there's a reason why this has happened. We're starting to see more and more hardscaping, more surfaces going in, more usable space. And unfortunately, we're also seeing more pollution going up, which is being directly tied to the choices we make in our outdoors. Now, we're also seeing heat waves all across Canada right now. In fact, we now know that backyards that are full of cement and concrete are on average 3 to 5 degrees warmer than backyards full of plants and grass. And yet, we still see this push moving forwards towards people spending more and more on hardscaping than they do on plants for their outdoors. And when you look at a satellite picture of, urban centers, we're seeing the green spaces decreasing. What's happening is we're getting more houses on smaller lots, and the houses are taking up more of the available green space. So we're seeing more density, more people getting packed into the urban centers. And as you can see from an image like this, not a lot of grass other than the baseball diamond, which not really a good thing. In fact, we're also even seeing across the country more programs saying save water. Water conservation has become buzzwords over the last 5 years, which is a scary statement when you think about it. Canada has one of the largest resources in fresh water of any other country in the world. In fact, we're number 2 next to Russia. And yet all across our beautiful country, we're being told to conserve water. So what's that saying about the rest of the world? We're also starting to see more and more wildlife moving into our outdoor spaces, into our backyards. Even today, I saw an article out in Alberta where a family of grizzly bears walked through, the downtown streets. This is becoming more the norm instead of the exception. Coyotes moving into our parks, whatever, into our backyard areas because we are, expanding our homes further and further out. So these are things to think about. We're going to talk about this today. Basically, I'm going to help you change this. I'm going to help you get the backyard of your dreams, at the same time save the planet, but I'm also going to help you save money because that's perfect. If you can have a beautiful backyard that's great for the environment, that's going to save you money, that's a win-win-win as far as I'm concerned. And that is what I am here for today, to help you do just that. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the 2 big bad words in landscaping. No, it's not Astro Turf. The 2 bad words in landscaping are low maintenance. And I take personal credit for this one. When I first started my TV show, Room to Grow, the mandate for the show was show low maintenance backyards. And homeowners started to really gravitate to this idea of low maintenance. If you have plants, you do not have a low maintenance backyard. And unfortunately, we started to see more backyards that look like this. Now I can hear the collective groans of all the people watching. This is low maintenance. There is no work involved with this. But it's shocking how many homeowners today, when I go to do a design or a consultation, the first things they say are, I want low maintenance. And while, it's not a pretty backyard in my, definition, for other people it works. They can go away, they can go to the cottage, they can go to other places, and they don't have to look after their outdoor space. And when they come home, it looks exactly the same. They get out the leaf blower and blow off a few leaves and that's it. I'm even guilty of doing some of these low maintenance designs. This is one I did for Room to Grow for my TV show. And it was about a bocce court and a fire pit and outdoor entertaining and very little plants. And this is not one I am proud of, but it is really enforcing this idea of low maintenance. And when you think about backyards that are getting warmer and warmer and temperatures rising, think about how a backyard like this is in the middle of August on a hot, sunny afternoon. This space bakes. We've put in tons of umbrellas. You don't see them here, but we're creating shade in an area that has absolutely no shade. So why do we want these low maintenance spaces? This is the question I'm really asking homeowners over and over again now. Why do you want low maintenance? What is the appeal? And ultimately it comes down to, I want to work less. I want to be in my backyard and I don't want to have to work. Yes, a lot of gardeners don't really see gardening as work. They see it as a hobby, myself included. But for most people who don't necessarily identify themselves as a gardener, backyard maintenance is work. So I always challenge them on this idea of work less. And the first thing I say is, well, do you have a gym membership? And people will laugh, and you're probably giggling right now, and everybody's like, oh yes, I'm very worried about the 15 pounds I added from COVID, and everybody giggles about it. And if you look at the news, everybody's worried about when the gyms are going to be able to open up again across Ontario, and yet people want to work less when it comes to their outdoor spaces. So I always think it's funny because one of the most popular activities right now for gym memberships is CrossFit training, and it's taken over Ontario and Canada by storm. And I did CrossFit training, and I'm lifting these big tires and I'm hitting them with sledgehammers and I'm pushing these sledges, and I'm thinking, wow, this reminds me of something. What does this CrossFit remind me of? Oh yeah, it reminds me of gardening. Basically, all the same muscles I was using in CrossFit training, I was using in gardening. And people were paying to be at the gym to do CrossFit, but didn't want high maintenance gardens because they didn't want to work on their garden. So then I started to crunch the numbers, and the amount spent on a gym membership per year in Ontario and Canada is $800. That works out to $3 billion in Canada based on the amount of gym memberships that we see. $3 billion spent on exercise and activity that if you had an outdoor space, you could have been using it for yourself. So instead of this view of looking at, your treadmills and watching TV, you'd have this view. It blows my mind. And yet year after year, in fact, already gym memberships in anticipation of the pandemic being open are going through the roof. People are saying, I got to get active. I got to get active. Couldn't you be active and have a beautiful backyard like this? Things to think about. The other thing to think about too is, again, urban density. We're getting more and more and more building and constructions on smaller lots. I mentioned it earlier, but if you go through your neighborhood, I am sure you're going to see a big, beautiful lot that had an older house being taken down, split, 2 houses going onto it, and the houses go 2 and 3 stories tall, so we're getting less privacy, smaller backyards. Everybody wants at least 2 cars parking in the front yard, so we're losing our front yard situations. The density gets higher and higher. People living in cities currently are twice as likely to contract some very special things like heat stroke. All the people in Vancouver right now are absolutely suffering through heat stroke. You are more likely to get heat exhaustion living in the city than if you live in a rural area with lots of green spaces. You're also more likely to get cardiovascular disease. We see an increase of things like asthma. Things like respiratory diseases falls right into that same category. And most scary for me personally, the fact is if you live in a city, you're twice as likely to contract lung disease. Things like lung cancer. These are scary statistics, and yet we continue to live in these urban centers. But what is this doing to the planet? We know that there's a change happening in the environment around us. This is not a surprise. We are aware of this. But what do our backyards contribute to that? We are seeing heat, temperature going up in urban centers. I teased about it earlier, but let's talk about that specifically. What is the actual temperature increase happening in our backyards year over year over year? Well, it's interesting. There's now a study being done, and this is being done in urban centers around the world to really study the phenomenon called the urban heat island. They are now showing that areas without plants or trees have temperatures up to 10 degrees higher than those with vegetation. Now, you've probably experienced this. Get out of your car in a parking lot where there's no trees on a hot sunny day, and the first thing you want to do is get away from that parking lot because it is hot and the heat radiates. What also happens though with all that stone in that parking lot is it absorbs the heat. There is more heat in the stone at night when the sun goes down, so that parking lot stays hot significantly longer. Alternatively, walk from that parking lot into a park and you immediately notice the difference. Even grass, vegetation, it actually acts as a buffer. We are seeing 10-degree differences in downtown cities like Toronto versus outside areas. And that is a big jump. And we're not talking when you watch the forecast, the weather forecast, and it says Toronto's 28 and Kingston's 28. We're talking about individual pockets within the city. If you stand in an area where there is no trees on concrete that has full sun, even though it's supposed to be 28 degrees, it's going to feel significantly hotter because of that temperature radiating from the stone. We're also seeing that 70% of all of the backyard renovations that are happening in Canada right now are made of concrete, pavement, asphalt, patio stones, natural flagstone. 70% of the materials we're putting into our backyards absorb heat. So how can that not impact the temperature when we go out our back door? What's also starting to happen is we're starting to see things like the stamped concrete being used because it's less expensive. So we're actually blocking water from getting into the water table below. These stamped concrete surfaces or these patios don't allow drainage. So now we're seeing flooding into basements when we get extreme rain, but we're also seeing water being diverted onto city streets, which now has to go into the rain gutters, which is overtaxing our water collection system in urban areas, specifically because we want usable space in our backyard. So how do we fix this? There are a few specific ways. Obviously, creating more shade around our patios will reduce the amount of sun on the concrete. That's a great thing. Adding more plants and trees into our backyard designs will also do just that. In fact, a tree is a fantastic way to actually reduce the heat in your backyard. If you have trees, you know exactly what I'm talking about. What's beautiful about a tree, though, is we're now starting to see stats and numbers. We now know 3 trees properly placed around a house can reduce your home energy costs by up to 30%. That is a large number. And what we're talking about is passive shade and wind protection in the winter. 3 trees properly designed or placed in your area to provide shade on your home, to keep your roof cool in the summer, to provide shade on your patios, on your asphalt driveway. They actually reduce your air conditioning and your heating costs even in the wintertime. Evergreens act as a windbreak, providing proper sheltering from your house so that the winds, the prevailing winds, aren't continually hammering the side of your home, requiring you to increase your heat. So 30% of your heating bills just for 3 trees. That is a huge, huge amount of money over a long period when you think about trees lasting 50 plus years. I also want to talk about this stuff. I mentioned earlier, water conservation is becoming a big conversation, and I want to address that a little bit today. We now know that less than 1% of the world's fresh water is available for human use. Less than 1%. That is a very small amount of water. And again, in Canada, we have the lion's share. We have so much water available to us. Unfortunately, as a result, we use water for everything. I saw my neighbor the other day out washing his driveway, using the hose to wash his driveway. Unfortunately, what happens when you do things like that is the water runs down into the water collection, and now we pay our city centers to clean the water instead of taking advantage of Mother Nature to do just that for us. Canadians, by and large, pay the lowest amount of water or for water in the world. We have it cheaper than anybody else, which is a great thing. However, we also have the record of using more water than any other country in the world. We have surpassed the US. We have surpassed Russia. We have surpassed everybody. We use more fresh water than anyone else in the world. And we use it for things that we need to question. We need to think about. One of the things that people talk about now is, well, what about rain barrels? We could have rain barrels to conserve our water. And it's a great idea, except in practical purposes, I have not had a lot of luck using a sprinkler with a rain barrel. 1 inch, though, of rainfall on a 500 square foot roof equals 950 liters of water. That is a lot of water on our homes that we're not taking advantage of. Now, rain barrels will, help us a little bit, but there is something else I will talk about later that's going to help us a little bit more. I just wanted you to see how much fresh water is available to you every time it rains. The other downside, though, is we have to start thinking about the materials that we put on our roofs. Asphalt shingles with rain barrels actually have shown to have chemical buildup in the rain barrels, washing off the asphalt shingles. So when you're watering your tomatoes or your vegetables with water from your rain barrel, you have to make sure you're rinsing your rain barrel out every single year. Yes, collecting water from the roof is a good idea, but we want to be safe and smart about it. The other thing we want to talk about is how we're using the hose. We default to our hoses a little too often in Canada. We don't actually know, if you were to go ask a homeowner how much water their lawn actually needs per week. Most people have absolutely no idea. So we just water thinking that we're doing a good thing. We're using way more water than we need to for our outdoor spaces. This is, again, the biggest culprit. We now know in Canada that the largest, hands down, single use of fresh water is watering grass. In fact, some studies online will show you right now that in Canada, 50% of the cold water consumption in the summer that we use is used for watering our lawns. And that's a very scary number. I always tell people, what do you use your grass for? And people say, well, and they don't have a use for it. People will golf on the lawn, I get it, but what do you use your grass for on your property? Now, I have said earlier, grass helps reduce the temperature, the ambient temperature. So yes, grass is definitely better than concrete and asphalt. But I always say to people, what do you use your lawn for? I'm waiting for somebody to say to me, I have a purpose for my grass. I haven't had it yet. And to think that we use 50% of our fresh water to water something that we don't actually have a purpose for, that becomes a little bit scary. But there is hope. And I did say 50% of Canada's cold water consumption. But there is hope. If not grass, then what? Because I'm campaigning to make better choices in our outdoors, and I'm trying to get you away from grass. So if not grass, then what? I have actually had so many people say to me, what about Astro Turf? I could put down Astro Turf and it's going to be great because I don't have to cut it, so I'm saving all the fossil fuels and I don't have to water it and no chemicals and all that stuff. And isn't it amazing that it comes from recycled materials? So here's the deal about Astro Turf. Yes, it does come from recycled materials. Yes, you don't have to water it. Yes, insects will not eat your Astro Turf. However, artificial turf, which is non-biodegradable, which currently in our marketplace is about 95% of the Astro Turf available for consumers to purchase, will last in the landfill, are you ready for this? 100,000 years. When we make a decision about replacing grass with something like Astro Turf, we are basically saying, oh, you know what, it's great for me while I'm here on this planet, but for after me, this stuff is going to last 100,000 years. So that is not a great solution. And for what? For something that looks like this. I actually have this picture to show you because in 100,000 years of all the items in this beautiful picture that are going to be around, the only thing that's going to be there is the Astro Turf, which is kind of depressing, a little sad. Again, making smarter choices for your outdoors. So you may be saying to me, okay, Carson, you don't love grass, you don't love Astro Turf, then what? What am I going to put in my outdoors? Well, how do we fix this? First of all, we know that permeable pavers do better for heat in the sense that they allow more moisture to get through to the water table below. When water is able to get through the stone into the water table below, Mother Nature knows what to do with it. She looks after the plants. She directs it. She filters it for us. We don't have to pay for that. So using permeable pavers is a great solution for conserving water. Another good one, choose plants that are designed for your area. You hear native plants all the time, and I'm a fan of using native plants, but also drought-resistant plants, plants that require less. The less materials like water and pesticides and herbicides that your plants need, the better off we are. Or even better, what about planting a tree? You see where I'm going here with these trees, huh? Trees in the backyard add a huge benefit when it comes to water conservation. In fact, we now know, even with the root structure of trees, trees save us water, even though we think they might absorb more water. Truth is, A shaded backyard loses less water to evaporation. When you have trees in your backyard creating shade, even around your grass or around your plants, you use less water. Guess how much less water? 30% less water. On average, a backyard that is shaded uses 30% less water because of the trees around it. 30% less. So we know that trees save us 30% on our energy, 30% on our water bills. Wow, that's already a good reason right there to have more trees in our outdoor spaces. Let's talk about the number one reason though. And you knew I had to go to air pollution. I had to talk about it, of course. So only 1% of China's 560 million residents breathe air that we consider safe in Canada. That is a scary number. And yet even in Canada, we're hearing days like high smog days, high air pollution days. Don't idle your car at the train stops so that you can conserve on air pollution. And yet we have one of the best systems in the world for cleaning the air. Native plants in Canada, our ecosystem and our assortment of native plants clean the air around us better than almost anywhere else in the world. Plants like ostrich ferns, ferns that grow naturally in our forests, are phenomenal at cleaning the air that we breathe. Canadian river birch is listed as one of the top trees in the world for cleaning the air. And yet, over and over again, as a landscape designer, when I'm talking to people about putting plants in their outdoor spaces, they want Japanese maples, or they want the Norwegian white paper birch, or they want, something very fancy. What about the Canadian ones? The Canadian trees and plants do better than all the other plants, and yet those aren't the ones we choose when we're designing our outdoor spaces. Canada has one of the largest remaining ancient forests in the world. And every year we're seeing sections of this forest disappearing. We now know on a global scale that 2.47 million trees are cut down every single day. Every day we lose 2.47 million trees, and Canada contributes to that number as well. Pollution, though, isn't just the air that we breathe. It's not just about the trees and the air and the cars. It's also about what we're treating our outdoor spaces with. This stuff has become a real problem. Thankfully, we're starting to see movements away from chemical fertilizers, away from sprays and pesticides. We're starting to see Ontario legislation stepping up and federal legislation saying, you know what? We have to really limit and restrict the sprays and the products that we're using to treat the things that we don't like in our outdoor spaces, like the bugs and the gypsy moths and the fungus and powdery mildew. We as homeowners tend to resort to sprays way too often. When you're doing that, start looking for organic options. They're out there, they're available. Organic options can be used. Still, you have to use them with caution, but at the same time, you're making a better choice for the environment. We now know that chemical fertilizers, they're more successful at feeding the plants. There's no denying it. When you see companies like, and I'm not going to get in trouble here, but Scott's and Miracle-Gro, when they're promoting their products, they work better. Chemical fertilizers work better on your plants, but they also stay in the soil longer. That is the problem. We now know that chemical fertilizers, specifically slow-release nitrogen that we use for our lawns, can actually get into the water table. And we're seeing algae growth happening in our rivers, in our streams, and our ponds all around us in urban centers. And it's specifically being tied to these chemical fertilizers that we choose to use to make our grass greener. Remember, I already said I don't like grass. Well, here's another reason why I don't like grass. The reality, though, is it's not the grass's fault. It's our fault for homeowners making the choices that we do. Nitrogen can last in that lawn 5 to 7 years. So if you think about it, if you're feeding your grass every single year with the weed and feed products or the slow release nitrogen, and it's lasting 5 to 7 years, we're getting these huge buildups in our lawns. Studies are now showing that chemical buildup due to fertilizers and the products that we use around our plants is leading to record numbers of toxicity in the soil. And that study hasn't even been completed and people are already really alarmed by it. So think about what we're doing in our own spaces, how we're treating our lawns and our properties. So how do we fix this? A lot of people have moved to composting for feeding your plants, for feeding the grass, creating healthy organic fertilizer. I have another thing that would work really well for your lawn, believe it or not. Leaves. Leaves are Mother Nature's fertilizer. In fact, we're now starting to see studies showing that composted leaf matter put on the lawn actually has better growth and nutritional value than a lot of the chemical fertilizers that we're spending money on. We're starting to see that leaves from one small tree properly composted equals about $50 worth of store-bought fertilizers. $50 for one small tree, just for the leaves properly composted. And what do most of us do with our leaves? We put them into bags and we put them at the end of the road and we say, take them away because they're going to smother our grass. Wow. So now we have trees helping us with our electricity bill, our water bill, and they're giving us a better fertilizer option that is free and that doesn't build up in our soil. Hopefully you continue to see where I'm going with this presentation. I also want to talk about this stuff. Our recycling has to have purpose. More and more Canadians are recycling than ever, and I absolutely am so proud of the country for doing that. We're getting smarter about the products that we purchase, the way we are recycling them, and what we can actually do with the recycling. But when it comes to the backyard, we don't use recycled products as much as we should. In fact, one of my favorite recycled products is this stuff, composite wood. Trex is a perfect example. Trex composite wood, 7 out of every 10 grocery bag in the US that's recycled goes into Trex decking. In fact, that works out to 1.5 billion grocery bags per year and 300,000 tons of plastic to make composite decking. It's not wood decking, but it works the same way. And what's beautiful about this stuff, no trees are harmed with Trex decking. Now this isn't wood. Wood, if you want a wood deck, this is not for you. But let's think about this stuff. Trex decking, they've worked continuously to advance the technology behind the product. And other deck companies are coming along as well. It's not just Trex. But we're starting to see more and more statistics coming out of this stuff. This product lasts 25 years. In fact, most of these composite companies will guarantee the product for 25 years. Real estate agents are now saying that homeowners who put in composite decks actually receive, on average, a higher value for their home because the backyard is perceived as being more expensive, well cared for, and low maintenance. The other thing about this stuff is it can be used after. It is recyclable. Trex now has programs in place all over North America where they will take the deck boards back. They will chop it up, they will grind it up, and they will turn it into new deck boards. So yes, it lasted 25 years for you, but then it becomes 25 years for the next homeowner in a different color or a different shade, a different texture. It lasts longer so that we are not using wood to actually have those outdoor usable spaces that we want. All right. I want to talk about these guys a little bit too. I'm getting so many emails lately about the rabbits and the squirrels and how do I stop them from eating my garden, and there's more than ever in our outdoor spaces. We are actually seeing increased rodent populations in urban centers like never before. Bunnies are everywhere because we've basically gotten rid of all of the animals that would hunt rabbits. We've basically chased them off. The coyotes aren't allowed in our backyard. The hawks, we put up things to stop the hawks from flying around. We stopped the natural predators, and now we have all these bunnies and these squirrels and the chipmunks eating our plants. And people are saying to me, how do I stop this? How do I stop this? Another thing that we're starting to see more and more of is deer in urban centers. I saw a deer the other day in downtown Toronto. How it got there, I have no idea, but it came out of one of the cemeteries, which, you know, is a green space, and it walked through one of the downtown streets. This is becoming more the norm, and again, not the exception. We're starting to see more and more wildlife moving in with us as we continue to move out from the urban centers. We're also starting to see a real problem around birds. Now, this is what I'm going to focus on in our presentation, the birds. More and more Canadians list gardening and bird watching as two of their favorite hobbies. And I want to specifically talk about the birds as we continue to grow as a population. And as we move out into urban centers, we are taking away natural habitat from the birds. In fact, Canadian breeding bird populations have declined by 13% in the last 15 years. That number, specifically from the Wildlife Federation, says very clearly that yes, 13% have gone down the last 15 years, but a majority of that has happened in the last 5 years. So we're losing our Canadian breeding bird populations. What the solution? How do we fix this? We have to stop using those pesticides. We have to still allow birds to take care of the bugs in our areas. We can't kill off the food sources for the birds. We also need to stop creating urban heat islands. Temperature change, climate change in our backyards is impacting birds. There are lots of other things, but these are two of the big ones that I've pulled out. Another thing that we need to do is we need to provide habitat for birds in our outdoor spaces. We need to plant trees. Aha! Oh boy, this whole thing was about trees all along. I hope you clued into that. So we need to have more bird habitats in our backyards so that birds can have safe nesting spots, especially the breeding populations that come specifically to Canada to have their young. By having trees, many, not all, but many birds use the trees as a safe nesting spot. But more importantly, the trees also provide food for the birds in the form of nuts and berries and insects, even some sap. These are the things the birds need to survive, and we're continually removing the trees. That's a problem. So what really is the value of a tree? We now know, according to real estate agents, that if you have a tree in your home value goes up by about 3%. If you live on a street where there's lots of mature trees, your homes on average are worth between 5 and 18% more than in the new subdivisions that don't have a lot of developed trees yet. In a 2016 study, we now know that trees save you about $73 on air conditioning costs. They save you about $75 on soil erosion costs because the root structure holds the soil in place, so when it rains, Mother Nature can filter the water without the soil eroding away. We now know that if you were to create an equivalent, it provides about $75 in wildlife shelter. We also are knowing that a tree, on average, will remove about $50 of air pollution costs. Now, these numbers all came from the Ministry of Natural Resources, so don't hold it to me, but there's studies online showing these numbers for you. But the big thing that I wanted to say is the grand total. If you have a tree, your tree in your home has an actual value. It has a benefit of value, an actual dollar amount. And in Canada, the average tree, full-size mature tree, has a grand total of $121,150. Wow, 121,151. That number specifically refers to the amount of money a tree saves you, amount of money that a tree increases your property value, amount of money that it saves for wildlife, for reforestation, just for having trees. $121,000. And yet people are rushing to cut down trees every single day in their outdoor spaces. In 2018, the Canadian urban tree canopy continues to decline. The numbers of trees in urban spaces is going down. Trees that are unhealthy are not being replaced. Homeowners are worried about trees falling or damaging them. Homeowners are saying, I want more sun. They're taking more trees out of their backyards than are being put back in. The canopy is going down. When we see how much money a tree can save us and what it does for us and how it impacts the environment around us, why are we not replacing the trees that are being removed? That is a scary, scary number after everything I've just talked about. So what are you going to do about it? How do you make a difference? Plant a tree. It's the obvious thing. And even people who say, I live in condos, plant trees in containers. There are many containers that do fantastic for trees. By incorporating more trees and plants into our landscapes, we will see a change. We will see temperatures dropping in our urban centers. We will see a return of our wildlife. We will see more water being available for us cleanly through our lakes, through our ponds, through our rivers. If you move away from chemical fertilizers and use leaves to fertilize your plants, use what nature has provided for you, you will see a change and you will save money. Trees make you money and they make your life better. As a community, how can we afford to continue to turn our back on this problem? We need trees to do better. And hopefully, after this presentation, you'll agree with me. And hopefully you can see me now. Hang on, there we go, I'm back. And hopefully I gave you lots to think about. And now you get lots of questions. Bring it on, I'm here for you.
Wow, that was amazing, Carson. I have so many notes written down because I'm like, oh, wow, the statistics are just really, they're interesting. It is discouraging sometimes, but you gave us a lot of things that we can work on in our own gardens or even in off a balcony. So I guess the first question that is actually coming from me, because I'm selfish, is you mentioned to put trees in containers on balconies. And this is something that I think a lot of our viewers may live in an apartment building as I do. And I've considered getting a tree in a container, but I'm wondering, like, how long can it last and live in a container until it's too large? Is there a type of tree that works best in kind of a container?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing how many trees do very well in containers. If you think about it, I actually encourage people all the time to plant citrus trees in containers. They go out on the balcony for the spring, summer, fall, come back inside for the rest of the season when it's a little bit colder. So if you think about your trees in that sort of pattern, you can have all kinds of different trees out there. There are tons of trees that are fantastic. If you look at, just even the Japanese technique of bonsai, all of the bonsai trees do very well in shallow rooted containers. Now, obviously, you don't have to plant in a very tiny little tray. You can have a tree like a fir or anything smaller in a big pot that you can look after. The key, though, with the containers is they need to be winterized if you're planning to leave them outside all year long. That means they have to have double wall insulation, and you want to keep them in an area where they're not going to get a lot of wind. Wind seems to be the big killer for trees in containers. That said, there are so many phenomenal options. I mean, let your imagination go. I've seen success stories on all kinds of phenomenal trees in containers, and it makes me want to do that. So whether you live in a balcony or with a balcony or a townhouse with a small backyard that's paved or even a rooftop terrace, trees in containers are well worth planting.
Wonderful. That's great. And I've learned a lot too now. There's a lot coming in the chat saying thank you and such an excellent presentation. There is one question from Barbara who says, you recommended Canadian river birch. What other trees would you recommend for backyard gardens?
Yeah, the Canadian red maple, maples in general people complain about a lot, but that's because of the Norwegian variety. The Canadian red maple is one that, again, really understated, fantastic tree. I'm also partial to aspens. There's a little mixed review on aspens, but I love using aspens because I love the yellow fall color. I love the mycorrhizae that happens with aspens. They tend to look after each other. And I love the fact that they do this in the wind. I love the movement. So looking at Canadian species is a real eye-opener for a lot of landscapers who keep defaulting to the same ones, the same trees that are coming from the UK or from Europe or from Asia even. We've got an amazing assortment. Why aren't we using them?
Right. And I actually noticed down by Lakeshore, they just planted a bunch of trembling aspen, which they're so beautiful all together when it gets really windy. So love that. Another question comes in. I've been attending more than 10 presentations, but you are the only one who makes me want to have my own garden for real, which is awesome. That's good. Kevin says, thanks, Carson. I see more and more native plants being sold in nurseries and growers. Do you think this is just a fad, or do you think this is a permanent change that will help?
It's really interesting. We're starting to see a movement. So, and I'm going to break this down a little bit and kind of explain my comment before I say it. Baby boomers were the gardening generation in Canada. The Mark Cullen generation, they loved gardening in the 80s. It was such a big deal. Generation X kind of came along and said, that's not for me. And Generation X started hiring more companies to do the landscaping for them. And that's where we started to lose our diversity in plants. But now we have this millennial generation coming and saying, I want to garden, I want to grow, I want to do more. The native plant movement very specifically is tied to millennials saying, I want to plant for butterflies and bees. What's going to grow? What can I use my outdoor space for to benefit the environment? And you're seeing more and more companies saying, wow, they're into this. Let's provide them more options. And that's where you're seeing the native species coming out a lot more versus, say, incredible hydrangeas or, you know, some of the other ones that shall go unnamed.
Wonderful. Derek is wondering from Facebook, I see a lot of people removing all the leaves from their garden in the fall. I've always liked that my trees provide natural decomposing material for the soil. Is removing dead leaves from the garden a good practice?
So this is a bit of a catch-22. You want to get dead leaves off your lawn. Dead leaves will smother a lawn and cause weak areas where things like fairy ring and fungal infections can take place. However, in your perennial beds, leaving the leaves is a phenomenal thing, not just for feeding the plants, but the leaves also provide winter hibernation for all of our beneficial pollinators. So I always tell people, leave the leaves in the garden. In fact, don't ever take them out, leave them there, even going into spring, summer, because the beneficial pollinators will use them, but the more they break down, the more they feed your plants. So I continue to add layers of chopped up leaves onto my lawn, or onto my plants, I should say.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Another question was that came in was, what is a good time to water your garden? Is there a specific time during the day that is the best for watering your garden?
Yeah. And again, watering is a very interesting conversation because for years we thought that if you watered your grass or your plants in the hot summer sun, all those little droplets will burn the leaves. That is completely false. Don't fall into that trap. The best time to water your ground and your lawn and your gardens is when they are dry or they are stressed and they need help. What you use to water the plants is the bigger issue. Now, don't go with the sprinkler that does this, the big high arc, because you lose more to evaporation. Larger water droplets are the key. So the sprinklers that go create bigger water droplets. That is a great way to water the lawn. And if you're worried about fungal infections, try and water when you know the plants will dry off. So avoid watering at the end of day. Going into nighttime, if you're wet down your plants and they don't get a chance to dry off, you're more likely to get things like powdery mildew and fungal spores happening than if you were to water in the morning when they have all day to dry out.
Wonderful. Thank you. Another comment just came in from Lynn. I'm changing my flower garden to native and removing non-natives except sentimental plants. Even Zare's Grocery Garden Center has amazing selection. I've been leaving my leaves on our flower beds. I raise monarchs with my milkweed and eastern swallowtail butterflies who benefit amazingly from leaves in the garden, etc., which is awesome. Great job, Lynn. That's great to hear. And Kevin just said, Carson's Market in Prince Edward County is a wonderful source for great organic edible plants and unique and environmentally friendly gifts, tools, and unique items. Thank you, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for the commercial.
Do you want to talk a little bit more actually about your work, Carson, a little bit more?
So, yeah. Over the last 20 plus years, I've spent a lot of time helping homeowners create these backyard spaces. And about 5 years ago, I kind of realized that I wasn't helping the environment. I was working against it. And I decided that, you know, I was going to make a change. And I opened up a little garden center in Prince Edward County that only carries organic solutions to problems. And I really wanted to start educating homeowners on how to grow food versus, you know, lawns, and really focusing on that. So we decided that that's all we're going to do. So we do herbs and kitchen garden plants, organic solutions to every single problem that you could have. And what's incredible for me is the response has been unbelievable. Everybody seems to really want to move this direction, and I've been so excited to be a part of it.
That is so awesome. I'll have to come down and see you one day. That's amazing. And I guess one more question if you have time. And I was just wondering if you have worked with cities before on their parks. I mean, you walk around Toronto and their parks are very much one big tree here and then tons of space and then another tree like so far away. Is there anything moving towards having more plants and you know, there's not too much going on in our parks, and it's just a little bit discouraging sometimes. So
without weighing in on the political agenda, there have been programs in cities, and Toronto Beautiful program was one program, for example, that looked after boulevard plantings. Unfortunately, when it comes time to cuts, those are the things that get cut first. The parks, without people volunteering to go in to plant trees and to do reforestation, they just don't have the funds to do that. I love Riverwood because you guys are doing things like creating the forest bath or shower. I think that's amazing. Unfortunately, my visual of that involved me naked standing beside a tree, and I don't think anybody needs to see that. But I thought the idea was really cool, but this is the type of community involvement that's going to make changes in other parks as well, when they're being used and the community takes the initiative to say, no, you know, the government aside, you can do what you want, but we're going to step up and we're going to care for this, and we're going to look after these green spaces. That's where the change really happens, which is why when I talk, I do talk to political groups, to commercial groups, but I like to talk to homeowners, because grassroots movements make the biggest change as far as I'm concerned. So by me talking to you, I know that people are going to go out and say, you know what, I'm going to look at my tree a little bit differently in my backyard, or maybe I'm going to replace one that's not so healthy, or maybe I'm going to jump on board and do some seedling plantings. That's going to make the difference.
That's awesome. Yeah, and actually, just for everyone watching too, we do have somebody that we collaborate with, Jean McWright, who's from Blooming Boulevards, and she's in Mississauga, and she actually transforms those little tiny green spaces along sidewalks into pollinator gardens, which I find so interesting. Yeah, so that's all the questions that we have for you, Carson. I wonder if you have any final words before we say goodbye today.
Yeah, I want people to feel like gardening is an enjoyable experience. Only take on what you're willing to take on, and don't feel like every single garden has to be full of plants and perennials and that. Do what you feel best about doing, because if you keep it manageable for yourself, A, you'll have a space that you love working in every single day or playing with, and B, you will make a difference. Just be smart about the choices that you make, and if you ever have questions, reach out. That's what experts like myself are here for.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Carson. And I will add too that gardening is definitely a workout. And
yes, it is.
Will enjoy. It definitely is.
Fair enough.
Thank you again, Carson, for joining us today and teaching us so many cool things, and for sharing your expertise as well. And I hope everyone has enjoyed. If you have any further questions for either of us, you can email me and I will get you in touch with Carson too. So thank you everyone for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.